Good morning, Northshore, and welcome to Thursday, January 20th. It's hard to believe we're already into the third week of January, and what an exciting month it has been, for sure. So I want to share this morning that I have three of our amazing district leadership staff joining me to talk a little bit about our ballot measures coming up in February. I'll also be providing a short COVID update at the end of our question and answer session and give you an update of where we are and where we're headed over the next several weeks. So first of all, as we're nearing the end of dozens of PTA meetings and community forums and bond and levy presentations, I want to bring back folks that we've heard from already and who I think it would be helpful just to clarify some questions that we've also received. So I'd like to, this morning, welcome Executive Director of Capital Projects and Operations, Reid, our Executive Director of Technology, Alan Miedema, and our Chief Financial Officer, Tracy Patterson, who've all been out on the virtual road, kind of sounds like a country song a little bit, out on the virtual road, talking about these ballot measures and providing information both in person at times and also in the Zoomosphere. I don't know, Alan, is that a word, the Zoomosphere? Or...
Yes, it is. I'm saying that's a word.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you humoring me this morning. So it is important that everyone in the community understand these ballot measures and sort of what they each entail. So Dree, if you could start with us this morning on a little bit of background on how the committees of students and staff and community members came to recommend the content, really, of these ballot measures.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. I think we'll use your term Zoomosphere for the process, or at least the location that we came up with these. Both Alan and I had the chance and really the honor to work with many of our community members to come up with the recommendations that you'll see here. Alan led a committee of over 100 community volunteers. I got to lead one of a mere 70, and it was really amazing to see them come together with a vision of what you'll see presented today as far as how our community or how our schools are going to address our community needs through this ballot measures. And let's see, if we go to the next slide, as we do this, it will really help all of our 23,400 students, our staff of over 3,000, and create those really caring and safe communities for all 35 of our schools. Along with the schools themselves, we care so much about the people who help us. Our over 2,600 volunteers, our many community partnerships, and then our staff who've really flexed and taken on additional duties over the last years. We've really seen the impact that they've had during COVID. One of those examples is our bus drivers who we've kept employed, and they helped deliver many of these 288,000 free meals that were provided during that time. Alan and his team worked hard to ensure that our students and staff had technology needs met, so they all had devices as well as hotspots for those who needed connectivity during this time. And as a result, Dr. Reid, I know you're very proud of this statistic, as am I, that we have not had the same dramatic decrease in enrollment that some of our other districts in the area have.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that makes it so all of this is possible is the support of our communities. With Washington State still not fully funding K-12 education, we really rely on these bonds and levies to take care of programs that aren't fully funded. For instance, our special education classes. And it's important to note that these levies are not new taxes, and they really stay in our community to do our hyper-localized work that we do. The three measures are the Educational Programs and Operations Levy, which we lovingly refer to as the EP&O levy, the Tech Levy, which Alan will talk more about, and then I get the chance to talk about the Capital Projects Bond. One thing that I'm that's really cool, I think, about this particular package is that our current tax rate in 2021 was $3.63. With everything that we talk about today, the tax rate actually decreases down to $3.28. And the reason this happens is because our community is growing, so our number of households has increased, and our assessed values have decreased or have increased as well. So that means everyone's individual tax rate has gone down, each household. And next, we'll talk about EP&O. And I think I get to turn it over to Tracy for that. Tracy Patterson, our CFO.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. So the EP&O, as we lovingly call it, is going to increase opportunities for our students. And over the next 4 years, that's anticipated to generate $265 million in funding. So what is the EP&O, or Educational Programs and Operations Levy Renewal? What does it do? It bridges the gap between the funding the Northshore School District receives from the state and what's needed to fully support our students, staffs, and our schools. So it funds things like nurses, mental health support, staff, elementary counselors, and classroom supports. It also funds services for students, including special education, multi-language learners, and accelerated learning supports. And one of the great things is it helps fund student activities such as band, orchestra, choir, fine arts, and our athletic programs, which is so important for our students' educational experience. And with that short presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Alan to talk about the Technology Levy Renewal.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm Alan Meadham. I'm the Executive Director for Technology, and I'm happy to present this package and a little bit of information on what we are going to be asking for within the Technology Levy Renewal. Currently, Northshore is in the process of collecting on a $62 million levy package for technology that was passed back in the last cycle. In this cycle, as Dree mentioned, we put together a proposal that the school board has approved to go forward with $80 million in funding over the next 4 years. But as we'll talk about a little bit, our tax rates actually go down even though we're collecting more money, which is a great situation. So what does the Technology Levy fund? Well, again, it funds that gap between what the state of Washington considers to be basic education and what we in Northshore feel is really necessary for our kids to be successful. Unfortunately, the state of Washington still does not really consider instructional technology to be part of basic education. So almost everything that we do with technology has to be funded locally. In our classrooms, that means just about anything that you see in that classroom that's connected to a network is going to be funded almost entirely by the Technology Levy. That means the presentation panels on the front of the classroom, that it means the overhead projectors, if we have any of those that are being used still, document cameras, the audio systems that we have in the classroom, printers, and all of those things. Next slide, please. The really important one, though, and the big one we fund are the computers and the devices that our students and our staff members use. During the pandemic, we were fortunate to be in the position that our community had already supported us enough that we had 14,000 computers that we could send home with students. Unlike a lot of our peer districts, we didn't have to scramble trying to find computers to buy, which frankly were not available, because the generosity of the community had already made sure we had devices that were available. So we have those devices in hand through the Technology Levy. That's great. But then we also need the software that the students are going to use. We need to be able to pay for that. That also comes from funding from the Technology Levy, as well as the operational software that we rely on to do things like pay our staff, route our buses, or provide the student information system that we use, all funded through the Technology Levy. And we also have to pay for training and support for those systems. Anybody who's ever used a computer system knows you can't just turn it on and use it. You need support and you need training. We provide those things through the Technology Levy also. As we bring new systems on, we train staff, we train students, and we train family on how they can use these systems and provide support. That's funded through the Technology Levy. In addition, adaptive and assistive technologies for students are funded through the technology levy. Those would be situations where we want to individualize the experience a little bit more for a student in the classroom, whether that student is on an IEP or has a 504, or maybe it's an accelerated student where some specialized technology, either software or hardware, can really meet their needs. That funding comes through the technology levy. And I will turn it back over to Dree.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. So for this bond, we are requesting $425 million from our voters, and it will look a little bit different than our most recent bonds. If we go to the next slide, we'll see our 2018 projects that we tackled are building systems upgrade, safety and security measures at all schools, including new locks in every single classroom. A brand new Ruby Bridges Elementary, a 30 classroom flexible space that's between Skyview Middle School and Canyon Creek Elementary. And last but certainly not least, the Northshore Concert Hall at Inglemoor High School. And I'm very happy to say that that school has received, or that building has received, a temporary certificate of occupancy. And by the end of the month, we hope to have a final certificate of occupancy. But the growth in this bond was really done in those three major projects. If we go to the next slide, we can see how the community that I talked about earlier, that 70-person volunteer community really impacted, because instead of focusing on a few new buildings, the committee decided, or the task force decided, to address our continued growth in the district by adding classroom space to numerous schools around the district, which allows us to take care of that growth, but it also allows us to reduce the need for portable classrooms. And if you look at this, you'll see that we expect the portables to be reduced by 70, and then add 110 new classrooms. So that would be a net addition of right around 40 classrooms. We'll continue to look at modernizing and repairing our major systems, our HVAC systems, lighting, flooring, etc., in various buildings. We'll also continue to maintain the health of our buildings by maintaining safe air, water, and outdoor spaces. And we'll also be continuing to upgrade our security systems. So this is the real, one of my favorite slides, because it shows the real unique part about this bond. If you look at the raspberry dots that are in the middle of these school sites, these are the ones that are having major projects. So we have 5 elementary schools that will have $30 million modernizations and expansions at Fernwood, Crystal Springs, Kenmore Elementary, Woodin, Maywood Hills, and then we'll also be doing a small addition at Sorensen Early Childhood Center. And then we'll be doing a phase 1 replacement of both Inglemoor High School and Leota Middle School. This is the legend that goes with that. And you can see, even for schools that didn't necessarily have one of the raspberry dots, which are the major projects, all schools will have something done on their campuses dealing with health, security, safety, as well as technology infrastructure upgrades. And then many other schools will have either outdoor learning or inclusive playgrounds as part of their projects, and also those building improvements that I talked about, whether it's roofing, flooring, HVAC systems. Again, the combined tax rate, you can see, is a decrease from the current, down to $3.28 per $1,000 of assessed value. Both levies require a simple majority to pass. While bonds require a supermajority, so 60%, bonds also have to meet validation. So we have to have 40% of the people who, or the number of people who voted in the November election cast ballots in this election. So we expect ballots to arrive maybe even today, for sure this week. And then the deadline for voting is February 8th.
So thanks, Dree, Alan, and Tracy. That's a lot of information to review. And as you might guess, we've had a few common questions that have popped up as a result of our presentations. So Tracy, one of the most common is, if the state provides funding for K-12 education, why are local taxes at times needed?
Well, because the funding for education in the state of Washington is complicated, Dr. Reid. State does provide some funding for school districts, but there's still a gap between what the state provides and what it costs to provide the services and programs that our Northshore students need. The state does not provide any funding for major construction projects in schools. And so in order to fill these funding gaps, school districts often utilize bonds and levies. And this local funding allows for our school district to provide the structures and the services our community relies on, which allows our students to grow and thrive. And also, for example, the state funds 3.6 school nurses for Northshore School District, but we employ 14.7, that's FTE, full-time equivalent staff. And to ensure that our students are healthy and well. And then another example is the state funds $38.9 million in special education funding, but our program spends at least $62.8 million to ensure that our students' needs are met. So you can see there's quite a gap there.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. It is complicated, isn't it?
Yes.
And it seems like every few years it shifts a little bit. So we have to stay current with dynamic changes. So, Dree, what percentage of the vote is required for these measures to pass?
I mentioned it in the presentation, but it's definitely always on my mind. So it's 50% plus one for the levies. And then for the bond, it requires a supermajority or 60%. It also, there's a requirement for the bond that we meet a certain number of people voting. So that's 40% of the people who voted in our last general election, which was our November election.
Okay. And Tracy, I know Alan touched on this briefly, but what is the anticipated tax impact for the measures in the aggregate?
Well, we're committed to keeping the tax rate stable as much as possible. And as the chart that Alan showed, or Dree showed towards the end of the presentation, I should say, currently we're at a $3.63 rate per $1,000 of assessed value for all three. And it's anticipated to reduce to $3.28. So there's a savings there. And that's anticipated to remain steady through the entire 4-year period. So if approved in February, the tax rate would drop and we would remain consistent over the next 4 years.
Well, thank you, Tracy. And that kind of brings up the next question, which is almost the most frequently asked. Alan, could you share a little about the February 8 ballot measures? About these being, are they new taxes or are they going to be replacing expiring taxes?
That question does come up quite a bit. Both the EP&O levy and the technology levy are expiring this year, so they're coming off the books. So approval of these two measures in particular are going to allow the district to continue to get the dollars necessary to support students and staff through funding for another 4 years. Local education levies expire on a regular cycle, and they have to be brought back in front of the voters, or we lose those dollars altogether. The chart that Tracy showed shows that tax rate for 2021, 2022, and the projections for 2023 and 2026. The bonds, some of those, as we pay those off, those come off the book also, and new ones come on. So it really is a replacement of all these measures.
Thank you, Alan. Dree, the capital projects bond is not a renewal, but it does replace previous bonds the district has paid down, as Alan just mentioned. Can you share a little more specifically as it connects to the capital bond?
Yeah, one of the great things about going with a bond is we have the chance to structure how we repay those bonds. And that really enables us to keep the tax rate stable over time. And I know that Tracy and her team really work to make that happen.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. If any of you have a thought, how do we also sort of reconcile this increasing home price in our community, because we know the property values and home values continue to go up. How will that affect what taxpayers might pay with these three measures?
I'm leaving that to our math teacher.
I've got that one because I am a homeowner in the community here. I've lived in Northshore for 21 years now. And it just so happens, my house is right at about the median home price in Northshore, $700,000 of assessed valuation. Under these new measures, my tax rates are going to go down because there are more people in the community, more of us sharing that pie, so smaller slices for all of us. My tax rates is coming down, and my actual taxes that I pay in this first year are going to come down also. So while maybe traffic gets a little heavier as more people come into the community, more of us share the tax rates, and that's always nice.
You know, I like the way you put that, Alan, and that is unusual for communities, really. But it's kind of this idea that if there are more people helping to share costs, more people pay a little less rather than fewer people paying a little more.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although the traffic, we could have gone all day without discussing that.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Well, thank you to the three of you. Just really appreciate the clarification on those details and the information that you're able to provide. So I want to remind the community that in terms of our COVID update, the 6 schools, the 4 comprehensive high schools, Inglemoor, Bothell, Woodinville, and North Creek, as well as Skyview Middle School and Northshore Middle School, which are currently paused for in-person instruction, will return to in-person instruction Monday, January 24th. And also Sorensen Early Childhood Center has been paused this week. And those families impacted have been notified. And we anticipate being able to start Sorensen Early Childhood Center back up again as well on Monday. I just want to thank all of our hardworking staff and in every possible role in the district, everyone is working so hard to keep schools in person and open. And also want to reach out and give a thanks to our community. We had a number of community family members and community partners who have stepped forward and come in and applied to be an emergency substitute in a variety of roles. We have a number of emergency substitute positions, both in the classroom and also in support service areas. So just a deep, deep, heartfelt thank you to all of you who stepped forward and are enabling us to continue this important work that so affects each and every one of us in our community. So it's such a pleasure to be part of the Northshore community where when the going gets tough, Northshore gets going. Also want to mention that we are responsive to the new Department of Health guidance beginning with this week. And you'll be able to note the new Department of Health guidance on our website. Alex, are you able to? Thanks, Alex. There's the link to the new Department of Health guidance, which again, we are implementing this week moving forward. So I look forward to seeing you again the next time we gather. And in the meantime, wishing you a safe and healthy winter season. And remember to be kind to yourselves and one another. Thank you for joining us today.